Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. My name is Hitzir.
I'm Isa.
This week we'll be concluding our first ever two-parter episode,
Yeah.
where we will finish up our countdown for the best films of 2022 so far. This is our mid-year report,
Mm-hmm.
breaking down and recommending what you should be catching up on, what has been released in the film schedule in 2022. Keep in mind, though, this is a big caveat. These
Yeah.
are the films that have been released in Singapore, which is where we live.
Yeah.
The films that have been released in Singapore in 2022. So some of these films may have made the festival circuit in 2021. But unfortunately, I don't live in France or Locarno or Sundance or whatever, so like I'm not at those festivals, so I can
Yeah.
only watch it when they come here. And same thing with my co-host Isa. So these are the films that have been released in Singapore in 2022. So for this 51st episode of Behold, we run down number 5 to number 1.
Mm-hmm.
If you would like to, if you haven't caught and you would like to catch our number 6 to number 10 picks, just go to the previous episodes where we broke down all our picks right there. But here we are getting to the creme de la creme, the top 5, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been separated into many different countries, so it's not just US centric as the previous episode was.
Yeah.
There are a couple of American films here, such as Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, which is of course American,
Mm-hmm.
and Megan Park's The Fallout, which is about a uniquely American problem. But on the flip side, we also have Jonas Poher Rasmussen's Flee, an animated documentary about an Afghan refugee
Mm-hmm.
made in Denmark. We also have Joanna Hogg's The Souvenir Part II, made in England. And Joachim Trier's The Worst Person in the World, one of the latest crop of great Norwegian films we've been getting in the past few years.
Oh yeah.
So these were our top 5 picks. Is there anything in the top 5 that you feel like we already covered from 6 to 10 that I got wrong? Maybe you have a different subjective opinion about anything else in the
No,
bottom 5 that I should have pushed up.
I think it's pretty much like spot on. Very, very honestly. Yeah. I don't think I have any differing opinion for that.
Mm.
Maybe, and I probably would have said in the last episode, I would have shifted. They would still all be in top 10, but I would personally have shifted some stuff around. But for the
Oh
top
yeah, yeah.
five, yeah.
Mm.
For the top 5, like it's pretty hard to. Yeah, for me, I think like Flea and the Fallout are like neck and neck. So I would
Neck and
have
neck,
them
yeah.
shared at number 2, and then we'll skip 3, and then Licorice Pizza comes in.
Yes,
Yeah.
that makes total sense. On the other hand, I was like heavily debating between number 5 and 6.
Ooh.
I was considering whether to push Come On to number 5 and to push Licorice Pizza down to number 6. So
Yeah. Okay.
they are about equal quality to me as well.
Okay, I can see that. Oh wow. I mean, I love Licorice Pizza, but I might have bumped Come On up to 5, probably.
Yeah. That was honestly like my late inclination as well. So like to be honest, like just as a disclaimer here, like Licorice Pizza probably is tied with number 5
Yeah.
for Come On.
Mm,
Tight lah,
yeah.
The only reason I put it this way is because I was too lazy to shift the rundown and to reschedule things. So,
Yeah. No, it's
this is just a
fine.
pure laziness logistical thing. Yeah.
Also, because we're splitting into 2 separate episodes, right? So we can't actually. You have to make a decision at some point.
Correct. And I wanted like Come On to like headline an episode. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, it deserves its spotlight for sure.
Absolutely, But let's begin with our core number 5 spot, shall we say? Tied for number 5 and 6. This is Paul Thomas Anderson's first feature since 2017's Phantom Thread. He returns to the director's chair with Licorice Pizza, and his latest film is a kind of joyous, hazy, nostalgia-inflected romantic drama set in California's San Fernando Valley in the 1970s, and it features knockout debut performances from Elena Haim, most popularly known as the younger sibling of the Haim pop group / band, alongside Copper Hoffman, who is the son of the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman, making his acting debut here. And on the surface, I feel like Licorice Pizza is about as far removed from his last film as it's possible to get. Phantom Thread was this meticulously staged psychodrama. Its
Mm,
visual language was as sumptuous and highly strung as its costuming, whereas Licorice Pizza is kind of this hazy, meandering, extremely funny trip down memory lane, sort of like
yeah.
this photo book, snapshots of half-strung memories and romantic embellishments. Its narrative and romantic tone are in some ways kind of a throwback to prime Paul Thomas Anderson. If that's a bit subjective, lah. Paul Thomas Anderson is always in his prime, but in my opinion, Paul Thomas Anderson is at his best when his storytelling is more shaggy. It's more loose, it's more lived in, it's more of a collection of half finished anecdotes than a meticulously plotted psychodrama like Phantom Thread was. Of course, I'm referring to things like Boogie Nights, and
Hmm.
things, or Punch Drunk Love, things like that. Paul Thomas Anderson's at his height, and this returns Paul Thomas Anderson to the style
Yeah.
that I know and love. Not that I didn't love Phantom Thread, I did, but this is what I think Paul Thomas Anderson is best at. Do you agree? And what do you think about Licorice Pizza?
Oh man. I think it has felt like it's been so long since we got Anderson in this style.
Mm-hmm.
And given I don't know if you can actually call it recency bias because Phantom Thread was like what a fair number of years ago, right?
2017, 5 years
Yeah,
ago. Yeah.
5 years ago. So like that was the most recent in my mind, and I rewatched Boogie Nights anytime recently. I haven't watched Punch Drunk Love anytime recently. So like for
Mm.
us to, I remember when we headed into the cinema for that, I was just like, oh wow, okay. Uh, the opening kind of scene already kind of very clearly and very strongly sets the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of the visual aesthetics, like, oh, okay, this feels familiar, but at the same time, like there's a strange juxtaposition from what I remember from Phantom Thread.
Yep.
So it definitely had a bit of dissonance there, but very quickly, I think, like just the style that he brings to Licorice Pizza and the story and just like the great kind of like character growth and action in this very kind of naturalistic style really puts you at
Mm.
ease very quickly. I think is the best way to put it.
Mm. I agree. I agree. The film is actually based on the recollections of Paul Thomas Anderson's friend,
Mm.
also named Gary. His name is Gary Coates, who, much like his cinematic alter ego, who was based on him, was also a child actor and entrepreneur. So the film is centered around this love story between a 15-year-old version of Gary, played by Hoffman, and the 25-year-old Elena, played by Elena Heim.
Mhm.
Meeting when she works at a job at Gary's high school, Elena is kind of set upon almost immediately by the precocious teen, whose effortless charm sort of chips away at her, and her detached resolve to just ignore him. Though she makes it clear in no uncertain terms that she is uninterested in him romantically. It really is an astonishing feat from both performers that neither Gary nor Elena come across as creepy or pestering or predatory
Mhm.
in this type of mismatched age gap type of love story.
Yeah.
Gary is obviously openly attracted to Elena, often to the point of jealousy, which is a big point in the story. But the basis of the relationship is never really sexual, but more of a meeting between two perfectly compatible personalities.
Mhm.
Their partnership is kind of a strange thing. It is rarely frictionless.
Yeah.
It's often a source of strife and pain, much like, real partnerships in real life. We kind of yearn for connection, but the most intense connections often yield the most catastrophic emotional repercussions.
Mhm.
And Anderson has always been brilliant at playing with this kind of inherent paradox from the violent business of partnership in like There Will Be Blood or The Lunatics of Magnolia or the lowness of Punch Drunk Love, sort of like careening through an increasingly surreal world in search of someone to share it with.
Mhm.
And rarely have two people belong together on screen more than this partnership of Gary and Elena. Even in their most impatient
Yeah.
or downright vindictive moments, those moments are there, but they pass and the intense connection sort of sustains throughout. Um, it's this kind of exhilarating feeling that would feel uh almost as if, like, okay, we are in our 30s right now, we're millennials, right?
Mhm.
So we did not live through San Fernando Valley in California in the 70s. We're just or just in the 70s in general. We weren't
Yeah.
old enough to, remember those or lived through those pop culture moments,
Yeah.
that music, the fashion styles and everything. But Licorice Pizza is that type of movie that makes you feel nostalgic for that, even though we didn't live through that era. It makes me feel like I did,
Yeah.
and I miss it. That's the magic of Licorice Pizza. Did you think so as well?
For sure. I mean, like we,
Yeah.
well, neither of us were born yet, right? This
Mm.
is what our parents' time was, and I don't know if it's so specific to that time period and perhaps the locale as well. Like we wouldn't be able to access that nostalgia via our parents' stories either, right? But
Yep.
there's
Yep.
something uniquely captured here that feels very much like memory, right? Like it feels like a
Mm.
recollection visually, with
Mm.
all it's the bells and whistles and flaws that is captured by memory and kind of like puts a sheen on it, right? That or the sheen that
Mm.
nostalgia kind of grants us. And I think Anderson has managed to capture that very,
Yep.
very aptly, with the visual style and just like the colors that he chooses, the kind of softness of the focus,
Mm.
the kind of like lingering close-up shots of faces and eyes and lips, like that
Mm.
really feel like a recollection pulled from an old memory, right? And I
Mm.
think it's a strength of the film for us to be able to feel nostalgic for a time that we never experienced, for us to be immersed in this world as if it were our own and experience that as
Mm.
an audience watching the story is
Yep.
definitely one of the standout things that I love about the movie.
Definitely. I personally have a lot of friends who've seen this film who feel that it is overrated, and I think maybe that is a subjective thing. Of course, like you're allowed to dislike or like a film or whatever, but I feel like this kind of doesn't have the mass appeal that some of maybe the other four films that we are talking about here, primarily because it has this very loose structure that I love from Paul Thomas Anderson
Yeah,
and from what I've come to love in my TV shows as well.
yeah,
It's storyless, it's character driven, it often meanders situation to random situation with very richly defined characters, but not
mhm,
richly defined story. It's almost like something you would watch in Better Things or something like that.
yeah.
And Yeah, that's the thing. Like I've sort of noticed this parallel. Like when I've recommended this film to friends, if they don't like Better Things, they don't like Licorice Pizza. If they like Better Things, they like Licorice Pizza. It's that kind of freewheeling character driven storytelling that it maybe doesn't grab the casual audience. And secondly,
Mhm,
a lot of people seem to have a problem with the relationship, the age gap in the relationship. They find it problematic.
yeah.
Clearly you don't have a problem with the first part. You like Better Things and you like Licorice Pizza as well. But did you have a problem with the second part?
Uh, I think it was in okay uh, in our current context, right?
Mm,
It definitely is uh, colored by like the times that we live in, where clearly it is a problematic thing, right? Because there are a lot of um, places where that age gap becomes a power play, and that power play eventually becomes predatory in its nature. Uh,
mm,
but in and of itself, their relationship, especially at the beginning of itself, sure, he's a 15-year-old, he's going through his what. I'm not gonna make excuses that boys will be boys, right?
mm,
But there very quickly, there is a respect that is formed between the two of them, and at no point
mm,
in time is there a power play by either one of them, right? Like they are
mm,
evenly matched throughout. So the age aside, right? Like it doesn't feel like the dynamic there feels like abusive or predatory in those manners. They match each
mm.
other, jab for jab, punch for punch when it comes down to it, especially in a lot of the scenes where they're in conflict with each other. The
Yep.
emotional tension between the two as they try and negotiate what their relationship is very palpable and very visceral in a lot of scenes that we get, right? And we
Mm,
we kind of like oscillate between moments like that and like
mm.
the more fun, more open, more free kind of memories that they share.
Yep.
So I think that it feels far less problematic while watching it than me telling you the synopsis of it and then you going like, oh wait a minute, that feels like really off, right?
Mm, mm.
Yeah, so like I would still give the film a chance,
Yeah, yeah.
regardless, just because I think like on paper it sounds problematic. in
Mm.
watching it and actually seeing what the story is about and how these characters um negotiate their strange kind of I don't know, a bond or attraction to each other in
Mm.
in
Mm-hmm.
largely a non-sexual way,
Yep.
is very nuanced and very worth like exploring.
Yes, yeah. Highly agree with you on all points. I didn't find the relationship problematic as executed. It could have been by a more, by a lesser director, but
For
in
sure.
Paul Thomas Anderson's hands, like the characters are so richly defined, the relationship is so richly defined that you understand where both are coming from.
Yeah,
There isn't an imbalance in power dynamics, and he handled it sensitively and perfectly.
I think so too. Yeah.
Any final thoughts on Licorice Pizza before we move on to our number four pick?
Oh man, I do. Licorice Pizza, I think, is a prime example of your kind of growing partiality
Coming of
to
age.
coming up
Oh, yeah.
no but of character driven stories. I think more than
Yep.
anything else. And
Mm,
like so much of what we have ranked so highly in like I think last year and this year in particular has been in
yep.
that particular direction, and we are getting
Mm,
such great pieces of art
mm,
coming out from that direction, or that kind of like point of view of wanting to tell stories from the characters themselves instead of having your completely plot driven one. Not to say that isn't good. A lot of
mm,
almost everything else in our top five here is in that particular camp, right? But yeah, I
correct.
think
Yeah.
like Licorice Pizza and Better Things are easily like prime examples of why you and now myself as well, I have started leaning towards enjoying uh, and and and
Mm,
um and recommending such content. Shout out to
yeah.
Johnny Green for an amazing soundtrack as well for Licorice
Oh wait,
Pizza.
yeah, he's been doing a lot of the best Paul Thomas Anderson scores. There Will Be Blood is the first time I heard Johnny Green do a cinematic score.
Yeah.
And then I kept being blown away by him. Like, I personally feel like he's one of the best composers or the most unorthodox composer
Hmm.
working in cinema right now. You should give him a shot, and I know a lot of people know him from the music scene now, but
Yeah.
man, he's giving Trent Reznor a run for his money
Oh yeah. Yeah.
in the score sense lah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Definitely. Moving on to number four, we have a film called The Fallout, which was initially released in South by Southwest in 2021, but only released on HBO Max this year for wide release. So I'm only counting the wide release. It stars Jenna Ortega, Maddie Ziegler, and Niles Fitch, who play California high schoolers brought together by their shared experience during a violent school shooting rampage.
Mm.
It's kind of a horrendous sign of the times that the school shooting plot is already a very well traveled movie trope. There have been so many films made about school shootings, from Elephant to We Need to Talk About Kevin. Even Natalie Portman's Vox Lux also was about a school shooting, and we keep all the reviews for the Fallout or those movies keep saying like they're timely, they're timely, they're timely. Unfortunately, that is true because school shootings have now become timeless, considering what's happening in America. There is a school shooting every other week, sometimes more than that. Most recently, the massacre in a Texas elementary school
Yeah.
shook up the world. So a lot of us outside of America don't understand what the problem is or what America's fascination with guns are, the Second Amendment. This is a problem that American politicians, at least on the right, claim that it's unfixable.
Hmm.
But they are the only country in the world with this problem. So clearly it is fixable. It is a unique problem for them. But politics aside, the astute and affecting the fallout by writer-director Megan Park sort of zeroes in on a more character-driven angle to this. It follows mostly Jenna Ortega as a female student struggling to find her footing after surviving the campus massacre. Um, Among all the films delving into this very charged territory, I think Megan Park's film stands apart in its combination of low key intimacy and, as its title suggests, the unflinching focus on the aftermath of the tragedy.
Hmm.
Only three adults appear on screen. Their roles are key, but decidedly supporting in a teen centric drama, which foregrounds this group of superb young actors led by Jenny Ortega. They live in this California suburb where Park has set her debut feature. It is kind of multicultural and privileged. The kids don't want for comfort, although some of them do make do with absentee parents. The lead character is the 16-year-old girl, Vada, played by Ortega, who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't fall into the latter category. Her folks here, as she tells her friends, are really good parents. She is a sharp-witted high schooler who basically falls out of bed um, in the morning. Just like a normal girl. She lives with a whip-smart younger sister, Amelia. Their differences notwithstanding, they have a really close bond.
Mm-hmm.
And when Amelia finds herself in need, the person she texts is her big sister. But soon enough, Vada's kind of regular life goes through something that upends every aspect of her life and creates distance in her closest relationships, particularly with her parents and with her younger sister. Shots ring out in the school, and for 6 terrifying minutes, she is cowering in a bathroom stall with two students she only knows by sight. One is a glamorous Instagram influencer type girl named Mia, played by Maddie Ziegler, about whom she just been texting something snarky about her, to her best friend Nick. There's also Quentin, played by Niles Fitch, who stumbles into the girl's bathroom covered in blood, having just witnessed his brother being shot. You know, um, this is the setup for the Fallout, and then it examines the psychological trauma and how these various kids process them or don't process them for the remainder of the film. Having just seen the Fallout, it's been like 6 months for me, but it's pretty fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
What do you think about Megan Park's debut film here?
it is it is heartbreaking
Mm,
to have to talk about this film uh and keep going on about, oh, it's timely, like,
mm,
man, how many times does this story need to be told before something is done,
mm,
but that aside, and then talking about the movie in and of itself, I love the Fallout for its very intimate examination of um the well, essentially the PTSD that comes
mm.
from going through something as traumatic as a shooting in a school.
Yep.
I love the fact that so much of the story is carried in very personal moments between two people and their conversations.
Mm,
That to me is the highlight of it, because that interplay between the characters, as they each kind of struggle in their own way and try and find a middle ground to either cope or to heal, or
mm,
to distract themselves so that they can keep going and keep waking up every morning without falling
mm.
apart, is the strongest pull of this movie itself. The
Yep.
performances all around are phenomenal. I think
Very quiet, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jenna Ortega's very subtle mood changes
Yep.
as she tries to sort out and process what she has been through. And even like,
Mm.
I mean, all around the cast is great, but Jenna Ortega in particular as Veda is, um, it is a, it is strange to say, but it is a joy to watch how nuanced and powerful her performance is in this particular film. The
Mm.
chemistry that she has with the rest of the cast and the rest of the characters is very palpable and feels very real. And all of that lends to a very powerful message, but that message is never hammered over your head, right? Like, this is a
Mm.
very real representation of what a survivor's story
Mm.
might possibly be, and that is why the Fallout, I think, is deserves a spot in our top 10.
Yes, yes. At every turn in the film, the youth and the innocence of Megan Park's characters just kind of pierce the suburban surface of a tranquility.
Yeah.
The director, I'm very surprised by her because looking at her filmography, she's only directed music videos before. Primarily, she is Billie Eilish's go-to music
Hmm.
video director. And other than one particular instance, she doesn't quite dive into music video tricks, but there is one song-driven music video maneuver that she does that advances the story to a degree.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it is quite a quiet drama.
Yeah.
It has an understated score, understated performances. Mainly, Park lets her actors interact. It has deadpan humor. the pain that they're experiencing is not spelled out for you. You
Yeah.
know, their hormones are surging and their flirtations are are there, but it's all very natural. It's all very regular and relatable. Vada, as you said, is in particular excels at playing chill and
Mm-hmm.
deflecting.
Mm-hmm.
And Ortega's beautiful performance understands the nothing to look at here facade.
Yeah.
While still exuding some of the the quiet chinks in her armor without her speaking about it.
Yeah.
We feel the sting of resentment when she watches her mother and sister being silly in the kitchen. That sort of spontaneity now feels foreign to her.
Yeah.
Bada's defense mechanisms give way to something more open-hearted, as she and Mia, who were kind of natural high school hierarchy enemies,
Mm-hmm.
gravitate towards each other. So via text and video calls, and then chats, and then in real life, uh, they meet at the gated property where
Yeah.
Mia essentially lives alone, and they hold the world at bay, putting off their return to school as long as their parents let them. And for Mia, I think that means indefinitely, because her fathers, both of them are artists, are away in Japan, and apparently her traumatic experience isn't enough to bring even one of them back home. They're almost always gone. She notes over wine with a friend, that they just enjoy chill time in the jacuzzi and the pool and the sauna
Yeah.
when she isn't attending school or attending dance class. Um, as Vada kind of blits out during the awkward getting to know each other phase, Mia is much gentler than the sexualized image she projects in the dance videos she posts on social media.
Yeah.
And Vada might also be figuring out that the girl she's long considered out of a league with her 82,000 Instagram followers is in truth kind of friendless and lonely as well. This is not a poor little rich girl cliche. I think actress dancer Ziegler, who is also a music video veteran. She does a lot of CS
Yes.
stuff. Fully inhabits the role. She feels soulful and intelligent, and Mia is practiced in also, hiding her ache.
Mm-hmm.
The small charade that she enacts the first time she welcomes Vada to her house is a brilliant bit of screenwriting that tells us everything in a few wordless seconds.
Yeah.
Everything is great. I even have to compliment the people who play Vada's parents.
Oh
Julie
yeah.
Bowen, who plays the quote unquote white and anxious mother, and then the Latino dad of A Few Words, played by John Ortiz. They kind of vacillate between hyper attentive, hovering, and then stepping back to give her space, never quite sure how much
Mm-hmm.
space to give.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a very long time in terms of the movie running time before they send her to therapy, but the
Yeah.
Fallout is not an orthodox therapy film,
Yeah.
precisely because I think Megan Park is uninterested in therapy speak.
Mm-hmm.
The two psychotherapy sessions she includes are potent, with strong and Shailene Woodley. I really really like her. I think
Yeah.
she does well in a small role here, but mostly it's about just focusing on the facial expressions and nuances of the kids. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of this film reminds me a bit of man. Okay, I'll get back to that thought later. You go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a point about like John Ortiz and Julie Bowen, right? Like
Yep.
again, like you said, together with Shailene Woodley, the only three kind of adults that we see in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Julie Bowen took me a moment, right? Because my association with her as Claire Dunphy
Yeah.
as a mother figure, right? Like that
Mm.
immediate kind of like recollection and immediate kind of connection there had me reeling for like a couple of seconds, right? But just like it is so amazing to see her in another mother role of this kind of seriousness, right? And she does a
Mm.
phenomenal job, and I think like in my mind the two kind of like major conversations that Vala has with her mom and her dad are like really really powerful in their own way, and like it
Mm.
showcases like a very important kind of step in her healing process, right? Something that Mia doesn't get, and that's something that plays out as well in that
Yes.
manner. And like it is so I think credit to Park to deciding to keep it about um the kids, right? Because
Mm.
it's so easy to just like, okay, you know what, like a big part of it has to do with the adults, right? Like the adults in the school, they're supposed to be the responsible ones, right? In the fallout of it, it is easy to shift that, around to add
Hmm.
more drama, to extend the story, to get more people involved. But the restraint in that, I think, is testament to her very clear vision of what she wanted to tell here.
Yes, yes, yeah. What I wanted to say earlier, and now I've had time to think about it and articulate it, is that I think the Fallout doesn't politicize the school shooting aspect of it in a sense that sometimes if you put political movies like your Aaron Sorkins or whatever tend to alienate one side or another side.
Yeah.
Instead, this just focuses on empathy for characters and what they go through, which allows perhaps people who disagree with gun control or whatever to understand the other side, the other point of view. It doesn't politicize the agenda, much like what I was about to say. Never ready, sometimes always. I think
Yeah.
in its approach to abortion, and as well as in the actors' approach to their characters, that they don't over dramatize the trauma and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I wanted to say. It just reminded me of Never Really, Sometimes Always.
Hmm.
Um, I love that film, but it's a hard title to remember. That's why I had to Google it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I,
despite the
I
fact
was
that they
confused,
repeat it
like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
time
But
and
I always
time.
confused. It's like never, sometimes, never, rarely, that kind of thing, lah. But yeah, yeah, I really, really love the Fallout. I think you should check it out. It's available
Yes.
in Singapore on HBO Go if you want to watch it there.
Hmm.
Any final thoughts on the Fallout before we move on to our number three?
Again, shout out to Phineas for a great soundtrack. Very understated,
Mm,
very chill, very
yeah.
chill, but extremely apt. Right, like every kind of like emotional beat is elevated because of the song choice or the soundtrack in the background. Like
Yep.
it's so important for the mood making and allows
Mm.
the actors to do what they need to do with as little or as much dialogue as they are given. Fantastic
Mm.
stuff.
Definitely. Now is our number three film. About a similarly heavy topic. The film is called Flea. It is a poetic and engrossing animated documentary coming out of Denmark. It is directed by Jonas Poher Rasmussen. This is a very moving film, and it is a true story of a young man called Amin Nawabi. Now, the character name is made up to
Yep.
protect the identity of the real person,
Hmm.
but Amin, the character, is a refugee from Afghanistan who fled the country as a child, along with his family, following the Taliban's takeover. Um, the first Taliban takeover, not the more recent one. Recounted by Amin to his friend, who is Rasmussen, the filmmaker, we follow his harrowing journey from war-torn Kabul to living in poverty as an illegal immigrant in Russia,
Hmm.
to a frightening boat trip across the Baltic, to a border crossing through dark and freezing woods, to being held in an Estonian detention center for months, before finally being smuggled into Denmark, where he found asylum under false pretenses. Now he's on the eve of his marriage to his soon-to-be husband, and Amin is valiantly trying to unpack the painful secrets of his past, his survivor's guilt, his fears about his family's reaction to his homosexuality,
Hmm.
and of course the lingering psychic damage of his ordeal. It's an intimate first person confessional that almost serves as a therapy session, a way for Amin to shed the burdens of his suppressed emotions and memories. This documentary is unique because it blurs the traditional boundaries of documentary by combining more standard stuff like archival news footage
Yeah.
alongside beautiful animation. So Rasmussen has crafted this kind of wrenching memoir that probes the traumas of war and displacement in some very intimate and powerful ways. It is
Hmm.
told with ample empathy and without sensationalization. Flea is mostly a humanist refugee story that is much in the same vein as Persepolis,
Yes.
shall we say. What do you think about Flea?
First off,
Yep.
really enjoyed really enjoy the animation style for
Mm,
all of that. Like as someone who is constantly watching anime, right? Like that's one style. Like there are moments in time where coming across something so good like Flea and having it in a different animation style with like it's very kind of like solid kind of graphic novel feel to it, where everything feels like inky and sketchy. The colors are appropriate for the scene at hand, right? All that kind of like brush work and line work adds to the tonality of the film, right? And that
mm,
is important because as a recollection, right, it allows for the scenes to take a more surreal, I guess, quality to it without taking away from the realness of the story, from the how grounded the story is, and the experiences that Amin goes through. I think
Yeah.
those work very well hand in hand. So that really kind of like caught me off the bat. You know,
Mm.
the story itself is fraught with so much. It's not easy to watch, right? Like hearing a story like this and just like the very kind of like intimate and personal details that are being shared here. From very, very kind of like small things about like the daily life before all of this happens to even like how they had to live or had to cope. Small kind of like observations that Amin recalls as part of the story are all incredibly intimate and therefore heart more heartbreaking because you begin to hear that as not sign of like some kind of like banner waving about
Mm.
refugeeism or about war or anything of the sort. But
Yep.
again,
Yep.
much like the Fallout, it is a intimate telling of a story
Yep.
in the most vulnerable and unvarnished sense possible, and that I think is what makes Flea so good.
Yes. Totally agree with that, man. And, throughout the director Rasmussen sort of never loses focus on humanity. He is not telling an abstract story about an abstract refugee or
Yeah.
the abstract concept of refugee rights or immigration and things like that.
Hmm.
But he's telling the story of a friend, a fellow human being he knows personally.
Yeah.
So the rapport between the two and the quiet honesty with which Amin speaks and the respectful and obviously deeply affectionate way in which Rasmussen tells the story makes this something special. This is a film, like you said, that I think wouldn't have worked in any other medium but animation
I
because
agree. Yeah.
in an hour and a half, we come to know Amin intimately without actually setting eyes on him at all. It's
Mhm.
an ingenious way to tell the story that's both extraordinary and also shockingly commonplace,
Yeah.
only with the teller's anonymity tactfully preserved. And so the tale itself can be hauled into the light, without
Yeah.
this kind of distracting, like like you see those documentaries with those guys like blurred out or hidden in the shadows, and it sort of takes you out of it.
Yeah.
Um, so this is less of a sociological case of refugees or war or displacement than a psychological portrait. And it's a film that is both probing and tactful and gentle. And it gives intimate attention to one particular refugee story while reminding us that Amin also stands in for millions upon millions of others across the globe who are subject to dehumanization as they simply seek a safer life. Um,
Mhm.
any final thoughts about Flea? What were the standout aspects of it, of the story, of the animation, maybe? Before we move on to our number two.
Yeah, I definitely think like there were a couple bits of animation that really were breathtaking. There's a
Mm,
particular scene of refugees in a container that I found to be just stunning, right? Just visually, the way to it was so without giving anything away, I guess. Like it was so evocative. I found myself holding my breath, right? In that particular
yeah.
moment, and like they're just these such painfully heartbreaking moments that it is a very flat style of animation, right? But
Mm,
the animators were skilled enough to portray facial expressions, which is a big and very difficult part
mm.
of getting animation right, especially when it comes to dramatic works.
It's a good point.
Technology has increased so much. The skills of animators has increased so much, but like constantly, even big budget stuff struggle to capture nuance in the face and facial expression, right? And for it to come about that way, as with a very flat style, is I think very very it's an amazing feat, right? To do that in the style that they've chosen, because like so much of that is still narration. Like there isn't as much dialogue from actual characters themselves.
Mm.
So like kudos to the animation team. Like that really, it was very tight. I really enjoyed that aspect of it because it's not something that you see accomplished very often.
Definitely. Agree with all that. Flea, one of my favorite films of technically last year, but also of this year.
Yeah.
You can watch Flea on the Projector Plus if you live in Singapore. I'm not sure where else it's available. I think you can rent it on VOD on Amazon as well.
Hmm.
So check it out if you want to. Flea, one of the best animated and documentary features of the past couple of years.
Hmm.
Now I'm on to number two, which I'm gonna give a solo review to. The Souvenir Part II. It's a great film, but unfortunately not available on digital, so I was unable to pass the copy along to Isa. So I'm gonna be doing this review
Hmm.
based on what I saw at the projector. Again, you can watch the Souvenir Part II on the Projector Plus as well.
Yeah.
The Souvenir, the first one, I mean, not part two, was, in my opinion, one of the best films of 2019.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I didn't see it in 2019, so it didn't make my best of list or anything. I only caught it in 2021, so it was a very late thing for me.
Yeah.
But it is written and directed by a filmmaker called Joanna Hogg. The movie was a semi-autobiographical memoir of the director's own experiences in film school.
Hmm.
It is specifically about a painful period when the director Joanna Hogg. Here her proxy is a character called Julie.
Hmm.
She falls in love and was almost ruined by a manipulative heroin junkie.
Yeah.
The heroin junkie claims that he worked for the Ministry of Home Affairs as some sort of, secret agent spy things, and
Hmm.
because like she was in love, she kind of bought the story, not knowing that whenever he was out or uncontactable, he was actually just doing heroin. The Souvenir Part II picks up in the aftermath of that doomed relationship as she deals with grief and attempts to process what happened to her
Yeah.
by making a graduate film called The Souvenir. Yep, The Souvenir Part 2 is about the making of The Souvenir Part 1, exploring how an artist's finest work is often rooted in truthful experiences.
Hmm.
This was one of the best films in general, not just meta films, but one of the best films in general that I've seen in 2022. I think Joanna Hawk's work here puts the lie that observational or heavily improvised films are easy.
Hmm.
It is not. There's an enormous amount of extraordinary control here and emotional control. Much of it expressed to Julie's life, and especially through the period accuracy of this, lah. And the ebbing and flowing of a post-loss depression as she tries to work out her depression through the art of filmmaking.
Hmm.
It's all in Julie's physical evolution. Julie is played by Tilda Swinton's daughter. Man, I sort of forgot her name, but she's incredible in this. She's as good as a mother. Honor Swinton Byrne, is her name. Fantastic piece of acting here. Yeah. This is uh a film about filmmaking as art, as industry, and as identity as well.
Hmm.
Jui's graduation film, as I mentioned, titled Survivor, also shares that title of the first half of Joanna Hawk's two-parter here.
Yeah.
Part two is Hawk looking back on that time in her life, but also looking back on the first film itself
Hmm.
and what it would have looked like if she had tried to make that first film when she was 28 instead of 48.
Hmm.
um, Autobiography and commentary sort of interweave seamlessly with the graduation film as Julie's effort to synthesize her experiences through cinema history and borrowed iconography. In the end, when Julie is screening the Souvenir Part One for her film school friends, it becomes a sort of full blown fantasy sequence.
Yeah.
This kind of weird magpie's nest of the Wizard of Oz and French New Wave and a bunch of other references. Yet it still has the burgeoning of Julie's own voice. The voice of a new fledgling filmmaker, realizing that she has to tap into herself to tell an honest story.
Hmm.
And whether she's making money from commercial films or music videos or making honest art house films like this, Julie has found her calling here. Ultimately, the Souvenir Part 2 is Joanna Hogg looking at Julie's next steps, even as she becomes more of a fictional character than a proxy. Yet, it's not about anything as simple as moving past grief or moving past trauma. It's deeper than that. It's about how art helps you through that, but maybe not entirely past that.
Yeah.
The final moments of the Souvenir Part 2 is probably my favorite final scene of a film in the 21st century.
Hmm.
I don't want to spoil it, but it's a great final scene that ties it all up beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
The Souvenir Part II is my number two film, but I think a lot of people might not like it, so my recommendation comes with a bit of an asterisk here. It requires a bit of a cinephile to sort of appreciate some of the references being made here.
Yeah.
I would say that if you enjoyed Irma Vep, you will enjoy the Souvenir Part II.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it lah. Yeah. So yeah, go check out the Souvenir Part 2 on the Projector Plus. It's available for rent there. For only $15, I believe, and you can keep it for the weekend. But yeah, highly recommended. Also available on VOD on the usuals like your Amazon Primes and all of that.
Mm.
Now we're moving on to the number one film of the mid year. Maybe the number one film of the year. It's gonna be hard to displace this one, in my opinion. When I saw this back in February,
Yeah.
actually, I saw this in late January. I wrote my review in early February. I already like decided straight up this was like my number one film of the year, or of the mid year,
Yeah.
I think it's primarily because like I think until recent years, romantic comedies used to be reliable crowd pleasers.
Mm.
And yet outside of a few notable standouts like The Big Sick or Silver Linings Playbook or stuff like that, vast decade
Yeah.
has sort of been a wasteland for the once dependable genre. Rom-coms have atrophied. They are a tired pile of old tropes and fairy tales
Mm-hmm.
played out by pretty people who fight and flirt and invariably make it work by the third act.
Yeah.
But just when you think the tried and trusted formula is finally done and dusted, 2022 comes along with a pair of kind of rousing rom-com masterpieces to reinvigorate the waning genre.
Mm-hmm.
First, as we've talked about, Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza,
Yeah.
is one of them. Now comes a new, in my opinion, instant classic of the genre from acclaimed Norwegian author Joachim Trier,
Mm.
called The Worst Person in the World. His latest film is a modern twist on a classically constructed character portrait of contemporary life in Oslo. He's done this a lot. All his other films are about character-driven dramas in contemporary Oslo.
Yeah.
And it chronicles 4 years in the life of, again, a character named Julie. This time, a star-making performance from the Cannes Best Actress winner, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Renee Rensby?
I guess I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's great. Julie is great.
Yes,
The
she is.
actress that plays Julie is fantastic. And The Worst Person in the World examines this one young woman's quest for love and meaning in the modern world. It is fluidly told in 12 chapters, bookended by a prologue and an epilogue. This film is kind of this finely tuned character study that doubles as an empathetic essay
Mm-hmm.
on the millennial condition, something that I think we both can identify with. We learn that a 20-something Julie
Mm-hmm.
is a flaky mess burdened by indecision. She is an A+ medical student before deciding suddenly that psychology is her calling. After she pursues that for a time, she decides to reinvent herself as a photographer. Shortly thereafter, she concludes that her passion actually is as a writer. Similarly, her romantic relationships are determined seemingly by whims and phases.
Mm-hmm.
She is a character in flux, perhaps insufferable in other hands, but relatable and endearing when helmed by this particular actress who gives a very nuanced performance here. I think Julie's biggest fear appears to be a future set in stone,
Yeah.
in which her decisions will define an irreversible roadmap. And as commitment phobic as she is, she does fall for a Gen X comic book artist named Axel, played by Anders Danielson Lee. She is charmed by his kind of older man surety and his certainty of how they're meant to be. However, roadblocks pop up when he confesses that he wants kids,
Yeah.
and Julie does not. At least not in the near future. And he argues that most people who have kids without sorting out their lives first. But she wants to do more with her life before kids. She can't articulate what she wants to do,
Yeah.
but it's something. And I think a lot of people find that annoying, but I find that very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And for all of Julie's talks of not wanting to settle down, it's actually Julie who's kind of stuck in her ways.
Yeah.
And then she meets this guy called Ivan, an alluring stranger she meets at a party in a sequence so perfectly choreographed that it somehow manages to mimic the actual serotonin rush of falling for someone in real time. But two actors play out one of the most delightful meet cutes. That is kind of the wittiest, most perverse take on that rom-com trope in years.
Yeah.
In yet another bravura segment later on, in which love literally puts the entire universe on pause,
Hmm.
Julie decides to leave the heartbroken Gen Xer Axel, and then she finds Ivan, someone who doesn't want kids either, and also floats through his career without any foundations.
Hmm.
And she sees him as the perfect partner where she can just be her true self without any unwanted external pressure. But does Julie really prefer someone who's there to confirm her worldview? Or does she want someone who can challenge her?
Yeah.
I think, whip smart as she is, Julie is not unaware of her flaws. She knows she's stuck in her rut. She's working as an assistant in a bookstore, waiting for inspiration to start. She even tries her hand at fiction, publishing like a cat person like Me Too era short story that goes mildly viral.
Hmm.
It is another character that refers to themselves as the worst person in the world. But the title encapsulates how Julie beats herself up over failings and errors that are nothing less or nothing more than simply being human or simply being millennial.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're a millennial as well. Did you relate to the struggles of Julie in the worst person in the world as much as I did?
Yeah, for sure. I think like I have had my finger in many pies over the years, just like trying to understand where
Mm.
best to be. I mean, I've done all sorts of stuff. I guess if you can call it a career, right?
Yep.
So I do definitely understand that desire to find a place that's yours, right? Or a thing that is yours. What your purpose is, what your raison d'etre is, right? Like and that part I can certainly kind of understand. I think Julie's story is an interesting one because at the end of the day um she needs those partners, or rather she sees those partners as mirrors to allow her to see where she is in life, right? Sometimes that realization comes after the fact, after the relationship. Sometimes it comes within, conflict within the relationship. And I think like those are very kind of key moments in the movie themselves, and seeing them play out, how she pieces those things together, or
Mm.
tries her best to piece those things together, because she it never feels like she has it all together at any one given point in time. uh
Even at the end,
yeah,
yeah.
even at the end, right? But like
Yeah.
there is a sense of kind of like progress,
Mm.
and like it's one of those things where, because she goes from partner to partner, it seems, or at least from what we are told through the film itself, they become kind of like markers, or milestones within her own growth as a person, as she comes to
Yep.
terms with, her desire to be good at what she does, but at the same
Mm.
time having an almost crippling, not anxiety necessarily, but almost a crippling fear that it is not what she's supposed to be doing, right? So like it leads to all this exploration, which is tied to her partners, which ends up bringing up a lot of questions that she has to confront both within herself and with her partners, and
Mm.
all of that, as complicated as that sounds, as deep as that sounds, is something that isn't doesn't bubble on the surface necessarily, right? It is something that as an
Mm.
audience member you glean from her interactions with other people, and that is very powerful, in both in terms of Renee's performance, as well
Mm.
as the key moments that um are shown in the film itself, right? Because in a
Mm.
film like this, there are so many possible scenes you could possibly show to tell the story,
Mm.
right? But the ones that are chosen seem so apt to bring the point across without, again, beating you over the head about it. Oh, like this is her problem. And her winning Best Actress is not at all a surprise, because it is extremely
Mm.
difficult to have all these things effervesce to the audience while
Mm.
in this extremely kind of like understated naturalistic style of acting. Oh man, so good, so good.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And again, much like I think Licorice Pizza, or
Mm.
even Fallout for the matter, like the worst person in the world is the most kind of, oh man, I don't know. It's the most slice of life, I guess, if struggling for
Mm.
vocabulary here.
Yep.
And like those slices are handpicked to tell a very kind of like specific growth arc for Julie. And, you know, as you kind of follow along, you are both invested and frustrated.
Mm.
And you know, there's a lot of like, you feel her how lost she is, and you feel like her heartbreak when she has to move away, or she has to drop a relationship, or whatever the choices that she make. You feel those things very, very keenly, right? And it's all because of
Mm.
the moments in time that are shown to us as audience members.
Yes, yes, yeah, there's this part in the movie that I think kind of encapsulates all that, right?
Yes.
There is this part when Axel is asking her about having kids, and Julie admits that it's not that she's just not ready.
Hmm.
She's not convinced that she'll ever want to be ready.
Yeah.
What has to happen first? Axel asks, right, in frustration,
Hmm.
and then she says, "I don't know. I need to do more first."
Hmm.
And I think most millennial adults still waiting for that official certification of adulthood will kind of wince in recognition
Yeah.
at the wonderment of what is the mark of a grown up? Is it having a baby? Is it buying a house? Do you have to truly know yourself? Can you ever? In essaying Julie like that, a character that is kind of opaque,
Mm.
shaped by everything around her, but vocally resistant to influence. Renee has this tricky assignment that she nails with a remarkable fluidity and grace. She is the same she's constantly inconstant, from
Yeah.
one chapter to the next. She is maturing at one point and then receding in alternating stages. And yet she is sympathetic. Uh because of her willful irresolution,
Yeah.
it outside of his non-judgmental exploration of millennial anxiety, the film also presents many sharply insightful segues into discussions of contemporary society.
Hmm.
Axel, for example, his provocative and offensive comics, running afoul of new wave Gen Z feminists,
Hmm.
is hilarious. Also hilarious is his very X-rated comic is adapted into a G-rated cartoon for kids. Sans, his satirical commentary,
Yeah.
and there is the kind of performative wokeness of Ivan's uh, X. The worst person in the world tackles some very tricky discussions with uncanny humor and eye-opening sensitivity, and finally with heartbreaking frankness. In a climactic sequence that I or conversation that I won't spoil.
Hmm.
But it's a discussion with Axel where I don't want to say why they're having this conversation, but Axel is admitting to his own existential securities as a Gen Xer and fears for a future that won't include him. And it might be one of the more moving scenes of the year.
Hmm.
um, I think this is a film that doesn't seek to make declarative statements about what is right or wrong in the world today. You can go watch an Aaron Sorkin or an Adam McKay movie for that. It just honestly portrays a human experience of navigating an uncertain world with quite uncommon empathy.
Yeah.
Its opening quirky rom-com comedy routine gives way to something much richer in the middle and towards the end,
Hmm.
and it's startlingly observant and a poignant view of millennial culture and how life just kind of comes at you fast.
Yeah.
The worst person in the world kind of vibrates with real life, like you said, the slice of life realness.
Hmm.
It's a film so fresh and untethered to rom-com cliche
Yeah.
that it might actually reshape your conception of what rom-coms can be.
Yes.
I love how it portrays the growth of a person without ever showing you that a person is ever finally complete.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can mature and you can recede into immaturity at alternating stages. We all do that. It's something that happens to Julie and it's something that happens to us.
Yeah.
And the worst person in the world is very honest about that. Like, it's not the usual coming of age progression where you come of age and then you're a person.
Yeah.
Julie is still becoming a person, and I think all of us are still becoming the person we want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I when you first recommended this film, the title itself gave me a very different idea of what this film could possibly be. You
Mm,
know, at no point in time does it feel like you are necessarily confronting or watching the worst person in the world. That person never appears. Um,
mm,
according to at least my expectations, right, of what that could possibly be.
yep.
And it turns out that there is so much commonality that one can find within Julie in portions of my own life, at least. That
Mm,
it makes you. It's a curious thing. I'm actually very curious why the title is called what it is. It is
mm,
certainly eye catching. It certainly sets up expectations and gives you something extremely different in its content itself.
yep.
But yeah, Julie is an every person, and amazingly, that is what makes this one of the best films of this year.
Yeah, yeah. I think the title sort of refers to the idea that all of us in our insecurity, and at our lowest moments think that we are the worst person in the world. Although we're
Mm,
clearly not, lah,
yeah.
but sometimes we feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay. You can grow past it and you can feel that way again.
Yeah.
It happens to all of us. It even happens to the Gen Xer Axel,
Yeah.
who for a supporting character has a really, really great arc in this film as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any closing thoughts, maybe like outside of Julie, what else struck you about the film?
Oh man, I really enjoyed both Axel and Ivan.
Yep.
Like I think these two particular male characters and kind of like not necessarily a tug of war. There's no active tugging going on. But
Mm,
the pull that they have between Julie, especially I think in the second act of the film,
mm,
is fascinating, right? Like on the one hand, there is Axel's kind of like success, I guess, if we could call it that, that
yep.
attracts Julie in the interim, and the other kind of like very personable, uh, Ivan, who is like that sequence that you mentioned earlier, that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
overnight instant romance, that
Mm,
kind of giddy excitement of it, like it's so
mm,
polarizing that it's easy to understand what Julie uh ends up to the decision points that she ends up at, right? And
mm.
I think it is only because both Anders Danielson and Herbert Nordrum did a phenomenal job at embodying their characters and what those characters stand for, without again
Yeah.
ever hitting you over the head with it.
Yes, yes, exactly, man. Agreed on all points. That's why it's my number one film of the year. You can rent it on VOD at a variety of places. Any places that have VOD, your Amazons or movies or whatever, you can get it there, as well as on the Projector Plus if you live in Singapore.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was our number one film of the mid-year so far. We'll see if anything tops that in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Anything like in the next 6 months that catches your eye that you think has a chance to be in your top 10 overall
Oh, for
for
films,
our year end year? Yeah, yeah, for films.
oh man.
Films is tougher, lah, yeah.
Yeah, I think films is tougher as far as goes. I'm not really sure what else is making rounds for the festival circuit later in the year, because we're going to be starting a new year soon
That's
for
true.
that
Yeah.
circuit. So I think we won't really see many of those till like much later in the year, right? The next couple of months are going to be fairly dry as far as like festival stuff goes on.
Mm,
But no, I don't see any of the big blockbusters topping at least our top five for now, right?
yeah.
All the way up to Come On. I hope I'm proved wrong, but at the moment, nothing on my radar as of yet. What about you?
There's a film by Olivia Wilde that is coming soon. It's
Hmm.
called Don't Worry, Darling. It
Ah.
stars fuck, what's his name? Harry Styles
Hmm.
and Florence Pugh. I know nothing about the premise. Basically, it's about a 1950s couple
Yeah.
in a utopian community. And I'm not sure what it's about.
Hmm.
But I mean, Olivia Wilde directed one of my favorite films, or one of my favorite comedies of the last few years, called Booksmart. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. Obviously Jordan Peele's latest film, with no
Oh,
synopsis and
again, yeah, another one.
yeah, and an animatic premise holds the promise that it could be a great one. David Cronenberg's latest also, holds the promise that it could be a great one also. So those are the big three that I'm looking at lah. But
Hmm.
what comes at the end of the year, we won't know yet lah. But
Yeah.
coming in July and August, I'm looking forward to those three films.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Those definitely sound like possible, possible. It's going to be
Mm.
hard to knock worst person in the wall, I think, and I'm looking forward for anyone, any movie that can.
Yes, definitely. Now we wrap up the episode with our recommendations for what's been catching your eyes and ears
Yep.
in the month of June. Anything that you like to shout out that we won't already be talking about
Oh,
in the coming months?
yeah,
Yeah.
we just talked about this yesterday, but I watched Hustle, Adam Sandler's new NBA
Netflix. Yeah.
movie on Netflix. I fully
Yep.
enjoyed it. Right, like honestly, after
Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems, yeah, like fully anything Adam Sandler is down to doing. I mean, it is so strange for me to have seen the majority of his movies growing up and other nonsense that he got up to in those movies, and then like in my older
Mm.
years, be a completely different kind of fan. Right.
Yep.
I really enjoyed his performance. I have to say that honestly, it's worth a watch, especially if you're kind of into the NBA.
Mm.
Congratulations to the Warriors for their and Curry for lifting another title. But
And yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think there were a lot of like great moments just for him to kind of flex that dramatic side of him that we saw in Uncut Gems, but in a much less not lower stakes necessary. Well, they are lower stakes lah, but not lower stakes necessarily, but less tense non Safety Brothers franchise. So it was really
Right.
good. I enjoyed that, like basketball and like dramatic Adam Sandler. I'm down for it. I caught that. I
Mm.
really enjoyed it, and if you love those things, then I think you might enjoy it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? Oh yeah, Iron Chef coming back is big news for me. Always been a big Iron Chef fan. Not so much of the American one.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I constantly rewatch the original Japanese ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, Elton Brown is online, and I'm a big fan. With or he's on board with this new Iron Chef. It's entertaining, for sure. I've
Mm.
caught that, and a really kind of strange side note. I think it's the Blacklist last season.
Oh,
Just
I
came
thought
out.
it ended already for some reason.
Yeah, so this it just I think it was earlier in the year, but I only caught it recently. And the
Mm.
only
Mm.
reason I decided to finish it up because like Caesar, like from they kind of lost the plot from like season 5 onwards, but I watched through it anyway because I
Right.
love James. Um, yeah, so I finished kind of that up, and like after like so many years and all the investments in there, I thought, okay, it ended okay. Like at the end of the
Mm.
day, it's
Hmm.
nothing like phenomenal, all of that. I watched it for one actor and one actor only, and he continues to
Yeah.
deliver every season, but everything else is just
Mm.
not worth your time, but I spent the time anyway. So that's pretty much it.
Absolutely.
As
Yeah.
far as like things that we won't possibly cover.
Yeah. The Blacklist reminds me of like why I kept watching House in like season 8 because
Yeah. Yeah,
Doctor
exactly.
House is so great and Hugh Laurie is so great. Although like the show clearly went downhill,
Hmm.
but when a lead actor is that compelling, sure. Same thing with stuff like Boston Legal once again because James Spader.
Yes, because
Right?
yeah, I'll watch most stuff that James Spader will do. It's insane
Mm.
that he carried a franchise for more than a decade, more or less on
Yeah.
his own. It's kind of nuts. So
Yeah.
I mean, like he stuck around and he made the effort, and I love him. So I'm gonna watch and just milk every character moment that he has because it's so fucking
Mm.
good. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, speaking of Julie Bowen, she was in Boston Legal as well.
yeah,
Yeah. My recommendations, number one of all the recommendations, is a new mockumentary by the creators of American Vandal called
yeah.
Players. Players is great. The first 4 episodes are out right now. They dropped the first four, and then after that, it will be weekly. It is a mockumentary following the world of esports, particularly a League of Legends team going after their first LCS championship. And there is huge drama within the team. Their team leader, nicknamed Cream Cheese, who has been a veteran pro player for over 10 years, he's now 27, is now about to be usurped by the newest member of the team called
Hmm.
Organism, who is a 17-year-old prodigy. And it deals with the team drama behind the scenes and everything lah. And you would think that coming from American Vandal, that this would be a comedy mockumentary that kind of pokes fun at the sports documentary genre and at esports.
Hmm.
And you're right on the first part. It does poke fun at sports documentary tropes.
Yeah.
That is his main target. But surprisingly, it takes the world of esports very seriously and very earnestly. It never mocks the players, it never mocks the games, it never mocks the culture. It takes it very, very seriously. In fact, to the point where players, surprisingly, is 80% drama and 20% comedy.
Amazing.
It is, you will be so engrossed that you think this is a real thing. Like it was so dramatic, and it takes its subject so seriously, but sometimes I forget that this is a mockumentary. Where some of my favorite mockumentaries like Spinal Tap or What We Do in the Shadows, whatever, right?
Yep.
You you always know it's a mockumentary.
Hmm.
Same
Hmm.
thing with American Vandal.
Yeah.
With this, I don't. I can't. Sometimes I can't tell the difference. It's that good, And I think the American Vandal creators have sort of like um, gotten the hang of the visual grammar of making documentaries, because I think they're big fans as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works really, really well. Secondly, speaking of satires of very famous genres, Only Murders in the Building is back
Oh
for season
yeah.
two.
Hmm.
It is a satire of true crime podcasts. I think the freshman season of Only Murders in the Building kind of unexpectedly turned out to be one of the breakout hits of 2021.
Hmm.
And it was kind of anchored by the incredible, irresistible chemistry of Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, who are this mismatched, generally divided true crime podcast obsessives who decide
Yeah.
to launch their own podcast to investigate the killing of their neighbor. Season two flips the thing entirely on its head by making its three leads the suspect of a different murder.
Hmm.
So now they are the subjects. But at the same time, the three, like one of the characters, Charles, played by Martin Short, hilariously notes that they have the rare opportunity to do a sequel to the original crime,
Yeah.
where most true crime podcasts, quote unquote, move on to a new case that never hits like the original. So not only does this season parody true crime podcast genre, but it also parodies the difficulty of making the second season of a hit show.
Hmm.
Which is extremely meta because the writers of Only Murders in the Building themselves are having difficulty writing a second season for the hit show. It is a messier season with a bunch of like, they try a lot of different things lah.
Yeah.
And there are some filler episodes based on individual characters here. Uh, but at the same time, they acknowledge it because the fans of Only Murders in the Building, the podcast, not the fans of the show,
Yeah.
but the fans of the podcast in the universe,
Hmm.
also complain about the filler episodes. So I don't know whether it's intentional or whether it's unintentional or whether they made that mistake and then they're like, we should probably wink at it.
Yeah.
But despite the messier mystery and some narrative detours, Only Murders in the Building continues to be one of the quirkiest and coziest and most joyous things on streaming TV right now, particularly because it's of the collective chemistry of Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, who are obviously having the time of their lives making this. It's a very pleasurable experience. Finally, on the TV side, I want to recommend P Valley also, which is also in its second season. P Valley is by Katari Hall. It is adapted from her play Pussy Valley, which is about the lives of strippers and the owners of a strip club called The Pink
Hmm.
in the Mississippi Delta down south. It's great. If it's not at all like Hustlers, it's more slice of life. There is
Yeah.
no like heist or whatever. But it's just about the lives and music and careers of strippers and strip club owners and the community around the Mississippi Delta
Yeah.
in the dirty South. It's really great. Season two kind of goes in a little different direction. It really leans heavily into Southern Gothic. There's a lot of supernatural elements going on, which I didn't expect, but it's cool as well.
Hmm.
It's integrated very well into the characters because of their culture. Like they believe in it, so we believe in it too. Finally, on the film side, I want to recommend Hikazu Koreeda's latest film. He was the director of Shoplifters, which
Hmm.
we actually also reviewed on Behold,
On
right?
Behold. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The director of Shoplifters is back with yet another empathetic film called Broker. And it is another kind of empathetic portrait of a found family living in the fringes
Hmm.
of South Korean society. What does broker refer to? It refers to baby brokers. Weirdly enough, so it follows this kind of baby box facility. Do you know what a baby box facility is?
Nope.
Okay, a baby box facility is a sort of community service that South Korea provides. It is a space where parents can give up unwanted children anonymously.
Right.
So rather than like dumping them in the dumpster or something, for a 15-year-old who's not ready to give birth or whatever, right? You could put the baby in the safe space and then childcare workers will take care of them, and then give them to foster parents or orphanages or whatever lah.
Mhm.
So one night, this young girl abandons a child at a baby box, and two people who work in a baby box facility secretly take him away to sell him to desperate parents. They are baby brokers. Um, Unsurprisingly, though, the baby's mother actually comes back for her child,
Oh.
wanting the kid back.
Mhm.
But upon discovering that the baby brokers will be paid a hefty sum of money for the child, she actually decides to join them in their rickety van to find her son a caring home. Improbably, Koreeda actually manages to infuse this dark premise with a lot of warmth and kindness. What begins with a crime caper, as a crime caper, evolves into a road trip odyssey, kind of reflecting on the family we choose and the family we must tearfully let go of. It's a very non-judgmental look at the Korean grey market for adoption, and it finds kindness in every single character. In typical Koreada fashion, we come to care for these baby-selling criminals when their fundamental decency is brought to light when dealing with others in need on their road trip. And they themselves reconfigure into a kind of Estes family. So yeah, another great one from Hikazu
Cool.
Koreeda. Yeah, those are our recommendations for this month. We'll be back actually very soon
Yes.
for a new episode of Genre Equality. What sticks out to you, and what are you most excited to talk about?
Ooh, well, I'm super, well, not super excited to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I would like to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi. So
Oh,
no spoilers there.
yeah.
For sure. I am very interested to hear what you and Heidi have to say about Strange New Worlds. So far, it's been glowing reviews all round. So I want to know what the two
Mm,
Trekkies on our side have to say about that. I personally have not embarked on it yet, but I am
mm,
looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Yeah, super excited to talk about anime this coming episode of Genre Equality, but I'm going to dive into some of the best stuff that's come up, maybe a couple of like really quirky hidden gems, and
mm.
how Spy Family is the one of the best anime that's come out in a while, but it is not the best anime of this season.
Definitely,
um
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, so we'll jump into that, and Hits will also jump in to kind of like weigh in on what is my favorite anime of the season, and apparently is
Mm.
his as well. And
Yeah.
looking forward to get into a slightly crunchier, I guess, anime corner this time around.
Yes. Plus, I'll talk about Jurassic World Dominion and Lightyear, two films I recently saw in cinemas, which disappointed me. I'll
Yeah.
also talk about the current season of Umbrella Academy, which debuts this coming Wednesday.
Hmm.
Well, tomorrow on
Yes.
Netflix. I also talk about Spiderhead, which is Joseph Kosinski's latest film after
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick. And after spending what appears to be my entire lifetime watching the latest season of Stranger Things, I feel obligated to talk about it.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to spend more of my life talking about Stranger Things, but hey, it's a big topic. It's final season and
Yeah.
everything. But
Yeah.
I kind of entered this time warp where suddenly months have passed and Stranger Things is still going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll talk about that. Also, I'll be bringing back Quick Hits Classic. So I'll talk about two older anime, including Ping Pong the
Oh
animation, and
yeah.
something that I've only recently caught. This is very shocking. It's Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, a very famous anime
Hmm.
that I've only recently watched. So I'll talk about that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Till next time. This has been Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.